Are we all right, Riaz? Yep, got the thumbs up. Good evening and welcome to a little presentation tonight about a YouTube channel called Bradford Through The Lens. I've been asked to give the talk by my friend Riaz there, who is actually the proprietor of the YouTube channel, but I don't know if he's frightened of speaking in public, so that I've drawn the short straw. But I'll introduce myself. My name is Nicholson. And I suppose you could class me as a historian of sorts. I'm very, very interested in local history, very, very interested in Bradford. And this channel is something that I'm very, very proud to be involved with. We're doing a live feed. You've all said you're okay with that. The only person that's going to appear on any screen or any internet group is myself. So you'll be all safely anonymous. Unless you start heckling me, they might recognise your voice, but, you know. Anyway, so I'll begin by just talking a little bit about Bradford and what Bradford is. We all know what Bradford is. It's the place where we live. And from a personal perspective, I've always seen Bradford as a city that's defined by its people, its buildings, and the events and the stories that have taken place over the centuries. Personally speaking, I am a proud Bradfordian, very proud to be from Bradford. I was born here in 1969. I did spend about 7 years away from Bradford. I had to move to Leeds when my parents divorced when I was a teenager, and I absolutely hated it. And I was 13 when I moved away, and as soon as I turned 19 or 20 and I was old enough to find my own way in life, I came back, and you know, Bradford is home. That's where it is to me, and I absolutely adore the place. I've never ever been ashamed to say I'm from Bradford, unlike some people. For example, when you go on holiday and people say to you, "Where are you from?" I always hold my hand up and say I'm from Bradford. And some people sadly will say they live near to Leeds, and I think that's a terrible thing to say. Bradford is a great place. It's got a lot of things going for it. It's got a lot of bad things that have happened over the years, but hey, that can apply to everywhere, really. The pride I've got for Bradford, I think it's inbuilt. Like I said, I always hold my hands up and say I am from the city. And there's 3 of us involved with the Bradford Through The Lens channel. There's myself, there's Riaz who runs it. There's another chap called Andrew Bolt, who sadly can't be with us tonight. He's another historian. And that is the one thing that we've all really got in common. It's the one thing that drives us forward. But I became interested in local Bradford history, I'd say in my early 30s really. Like I said, I was born in 1969 and I wasn't around in the 50s and the 60s. And it was through all the nostalgia books that you were able to buy from W.H. Smith. I used to get them as Christmas presents, so I couldn't think of anything else I wanted really. And I've been looking through all these pictures and I've been seeing things like Quirky Market, which I vaguely remember being demolished. I think I was about 4. And then the other great buildings like Swan Arcade, the original Odeon on Manchester Road. And that's where my interest in local history started, because I started to lament things that I didn't even know. I was far too young to have even known them. All these buildings had gone long before I was born. But I think learning about local history and the things that happened, and I'm not talking about the industrial side, I'm just talking about the city in general. That's the one thing that really, almost like justifies the love I have for the city. I became a member of the Bradford Odeon Rescue Group in 2006. I was watching that from the sidelines for a couple of years, and I was quite an active supporter of the group. And because I had been far too young to do anything about the loss of Quirky Market, for example, when the time came for another potential Bradford iconic building to be swept aside, I thought, no, we can't sit around and let this happen. And fortunately, that was a battle that we all did collectively win as a city. And I'm also involved with Bradford Live, the group that's currently redeveloping the building into a concert venue. I go in every week, I photograph the works that are going on, and I recently had a book published about the cinema's history. So that brings things round full circle really to my little intro. I'm very, very passionate about Bradford, and I love finding out quirky and interesting things about its history. So Bradford Through The Lens, as I've mentioned, it's a YouTube channel, and this is the very first talk that anyone's ever done about the channel, so if it goes off in little tangents or it stalls at certain points, do forgive me, it's the first time I've done it. But it's a channel that I discovered during lockdown, because that's when Riaz started doing it in earnest. He started off as a street photographer, I understand. He'd been doing that for about 10 years. And then when lockdown happened, there wasn't really much for him to photograph on the streets anymore. So what he started doing is he started going out and about around the streets of Bradford and finding interesting things to talk about and to film. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a presentation for you. I'm going to have to turn the lights out sadly so we can see what's what on the screen. But just bear with me while I do that. I hope I don't trip up. Right, so you can see the light of the projector. You can see the tripod. I'm going to grab some just now. There you are. Hello, sir. Right, I can see now. Like I say, this is the first time I've done this, and one or two gremlins might creep in. Right, there we go. There's my phone down here, so I need some lights. There we go. So you can all that. Right, so hopefully you can all see that. It looks quite clear actually, it's very nice. I started watching Bradford Through The Lens as a casual viewer of YouTube, like I say, during lockdown, about 2021. And I actually started watching some of the videos that Riaz had made about some of the victims of the Yorkshire Ripper. A lot of his videos tended to be in graveyards. But I think if you look at graveyards for what they are, they're actually a very good reference point for a city's history and heritage, whether that's good or it's bad, because it's, you know, it's etched in stone, and graveyards are the place where you find information about your city and about who lived there. Riaz has always felt that he's had what he calls an inquiring mind and a passion for detective work, and he likes putting two and two together to piece together fragments of clues to try and present an informal account of local history. And Riaz was also especially keen for the city's younger people to connect with his channel, and in order to do that he opted for a relaxed no-frill style of presentation. A lot of the YouTube videos that you might come across, they're all very, very professionally made, and I used to make podcasts for Bradford Live during lockdown to keep myself going, and I was very fond of things like having fade outs and picture inserts and background music and all the rest of it. But that isn't the approach that Riaz wants to use. He wants it to be like no sugarcoating, and he also wanted the viewer to feel like they were going on a bit of a journey with him. And I suppose one of the more positive aspects of lockdown, there isn't really anything positive about lockdown, but for creative people such as Riaz and myself with the Bradford Life podcast, it did provide encouragement for those with an artistic or creative bent to pursue things and to develop them. I've already said that bit, excuse me. Reading my torchlight here. So I became a fan of the work that Riaz did, and I reached out to him because, like I say, a lot of the videos were about cemeteries or things that went on inside cemeteries. There's Riaz there, I should have shown you that earlier. That's Riaz in lockdown, developing Bradford Through The Lens. And there's a little bit of information about the YouTube channel. I don't know if you can read that at the bottom, but the aim of the YouTube group is to capture and show parts of Bradford's history, heritage, quirks and other positive images to give the city the respect it deserves. As I mentioned earlier, Riaz goes on to say, our videos have no fancy edits and I like to keep it real, as if the viewer is on a journey with us. If you live around the West Yorkshire area, I'm sure you will like to view some of my videos. Better still, we hope to reach out much further in blogging ideas and interact with the viewer. So, the first time I got in touch with Riaz, like I say, a lot of his videos tended to be about graveyards and monuments, and the stories that were attached to the people that were within those graves. And I asked him if he'd ever heard of the story about the Lowmore explosion. And I don't know if that grave there on that picture is familiar to you, but that used to be in Schoolmore Cemetery, where some of the firemen that were killed in the Lowmore explosion of 1916, was it? Yeah, 1916. They were interred within that grave. That grave over the years became an object of vandalism, and it was moved in 2003, I believe, from Schoolmore Cemetery to the fire station at Birkenshaw. So Riaz went to Schoolmore Cemetery to capture the grave. He also went to that fire station, and he also met with local historians involved with Lowmore, and he was able to make a video blog about the Lowmore explosion. Like I say, I'm only showing you this part because it was my introduction to Riaz as a potential future collaborator. One of the things that we first did together, myself and Riaz, we discovered that there was fragments of the old Kergate market dotted about the Bradford district. There's some outside a building on Peckover Street in Little Germany, and if you go on the YouTube channel, I think you've all got cards there, you'll be able to find the channel. If you go onto YouTube, you will see my first collaboration with Riaz, where we looked at some of those pieces of old stone. And that opened up a door for us because we were later informed that there were further fragments of Kergate Market stored on the old grounds that were formerly the Manningham Mills, where Lister's chimney is. So here's a few pictures that we took when we went to have a look at the other bits of stonework. You can just make out there what looks like a boy with a cap on. That formed part of the archway above the Darley Street entrance of Kergate Market. So there's the head. That will have been attached to that bit. You can see an arm and the top part of a leg. And there's the rest of it. And there's lots and lots of stone there. I've actually made approaches to the council asking them to reinstate this stonework into the new complex that they're currently constructing on Darley Street, and I've been informed that the floor foundations wouldn't be able to take the weight, which I find a little bit hard to believe, but there you go. But maybe one day some aspects of Old Kergate Market will return to the area. Now that's Andrew Bolt. He's another historian that's involved with the channel, and that's him on top of one of the domes of the Odeon. He was involved with the campaign to save it as well, and lockdown was really, really bad for Andrew. It affected his confidence in a way that I won't go into too much at the moment, but let's just say he was very, very reluctant to leave the house at that time. And he has an absolute wealth of knowledge about Bradford history. He actually has, I would say, the whole of old demolished Bradford in his spare room, because he's the sort of guy where you could say, oh, there was a lamppost somewhere up on Manningham Lane, and he'll probably have that lamppost in that spare room. He has absolutely everything, and he is a font of knowledge in relation to the history of Bradford. And it was a pleasure really to drag him out of hiding and for him to get involved with Bradford Through The Lens, because now he's one of the other stars of the channel. And if you go onto the channel, you'll see lots of videos featuring Andrew. I think the most viewed video that we've got on the channel involves Andrew, and that's where yourself and Andrew went into a tunnel beneath one of these streets in Saltaire. So there's lots and lots of interesting things there. I'd say, oops, go back, I've gone too far. I'd say that one of the best things that Bradford has going for it is its scenery, and I think it makes a fantastic video backdrop, regardless of where or what it is. Bradford is very, very photogenic, and Riaz's GoPro camera that he uses for his videos, and I will be showing you a few videos shortly, I think it captures the district perfectly. And what I particularly love is the fact he's been doing it for a couple of years, and we've gone through all the seasons, all 4 of them, and you just get a feel of what Bradford is like in either summer or winter, autumn or spring. That's one of the wonderful things about the videos. Now, one of the things that I'm interested in is ghost stories and paranormal things, and one of the early collaborations I did after the Kirkgate Market Stone thing was a few local ghost story legends. The first was the Rebecca legend. Is anybody familiar with that one? Has anyone ever heard of that? Up in the Horton Bank Top area there's Bracknell Park, and apparently there was a young girl who was thrown to her death by a callous lover, and she supposedly haunts Bracknell Park, and she also supposedly haunts the viaduct up in Thornton, because another local legend places are there, and that's where she was chucked off. But there was another location in Thornton, which was that one, which was the old Fever Hospital up on Back Lane, and that was a reputedly haunted place, and we did a video up there as well, based on the story that appeared in the Telegraph and Argus in 1971 during its demolition. 2 workmen saw ghosts there, and when I looked further into the tale of that building, I found a lot of testimonials from the folk of Thornton that spoke about strange things that they saw up there. So we've got a few videos along those lines as well. Now, one of the videos that Andrew Bolt made with Riaz was a story about a freak storm up at the Hanson School, where a girl had been lifted by a strong gale up into the air, and then it dropped her and killed her. And it reminded me of a similar story, which it was 1911 when that disaster happened at that school, that freak accident. And it got me thinking about a similar thing that happened with the wind and the death of a child in 1916 at a cinema building up at the bottom of Barker End Road. And that's going to be the first video I'm going to show to you. Now, the video on the channel is about 12, 13, 40 minutes long. What I'll try to do is edit them down into more bite-sized chunks. So I've taken a few bits out. These only last for about 5 minutes, these first videos, but this is a video about the death at the cinema.
Hello YouTubers, today I'm beaming directly from my car. The reason being is we've got a blizzard outside and it's raining, and I'm going to fight the elements for this particular blog. Now, a few weeks back I did a blog on Mary Ann Bailey, who was a victim of a disaster. It was all about girls at that day, and we've got a similar story that relates to a young boy. And with me I've got Mark Nicholson, who's got all the information, and in our usual manner we will actually visit the grave of the deceased. Mark, thank you for joining us.
No problem, what a lovely day.
Yeah.
So yeah, as you say there was obviously the incident involving the wind and the death of a local child, and when I first watched that, it actually brought to mind a similar incident that happened in Bradford in 1916 on New Year's Day. That was a very, very, very windy day, and it made the local news. So you've got like the headline there, Gale in Bradford. There was all sorts happening all across the north of England, and Bradford bore more than its fair share of, of the brunt, as it were. There was things like people getting injured by wooden hoardings getting blown over. Gable ends were falling off of houses. People were thinking that the crashes were loud enough for it to have been a tram car blown over. The guys back in those days were made of sterner stuff than we are perhaps today. It was a Saturday, it was New Year's Day 1916, and they tried to go ahead with all of the local football matches, but they soon got called off. It was a really, really, really bad day in terms of weather. And in terms of fatalities, there was just one, and it was a local child, and it's a very, very sad story. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave the warmth and the dry conditions of this car. We're going to go out into the rain to bring our viewers to the site of this tragedy. So we're now on a very, very noisy and busy corner of the outer section of the city centre, and behind me, on what used to be East Parade in Bradford, is the former St Mary's Catholic Church. It's now in use as a banqueting hall, and we've got an archive picture here, an illustration of how it used to look. And what isn't in this picture, in this space here, but we can see it now, is a former cinema building. This cinema was called the Scala, and as you can see, they're using the cinema name over there in the suite extension. It was that cinema building which was the scene of the tragedy which killed the local child. If we go back to the archive picture, you can see at either end stone crosses. An eyewitness on that very night said that there was a huge flash of lightning and a large crash. And what happened is the stone cross that was originally up there in the top corner of that roof, it became dislodged and it fell through the roof of the cinema and it struck the child. The masonry itself was said to be about half a ton in weight, so it does look like the child was killed instantly. So 3 days after the storm tragedy, there was an inquest in Bradford, and I'm going to read a few extracts from the inquest itself. The victim of the disaster was a boy named Albert Edward Ross, aged 12, who was killed by an ornamental stone cross on St Mary's Catholic Church, East Parade, falling through the roof of the picture house while an audience was assembling for an early performance. A boy named Herbert Scott, aged 11, who accompanied the deceased, said they were sat in the centre of the hall. About 10 minutes after their arrival, there was a sudden crash and something fell near to where he was sitting. He rushed away as he was frightened. At the time of the accident, the lights of the building were turned on at full. John Thomas Miller, a foundryman, aged 51, who was also present at the picture house, spoke of seeing a large piece of masonry fall through the roof and glass falling about in the hall. People and children were rushing about, and the witness went to the place where the piece of masonry fell. He found the deceased seated on the floor, the piece of masonry laying across his legs. There was also a cut on the head, and the deceased seemed to be quite dead. With assistance, the stone was removed, and the deceased extricated. There have been checks to the church and the cross on the roof in the years leading up to the incident, and it was found that it was quite secure. The inquest concluded that there was no negligence or anything on the part of the church or its owners, and the final verdict of the inquest was accidental death.
Right, so we've just arrived at the Bowling Cemetery and we've located the grave here. Still wet and windy, I'm afraid.
Well, you know, what an absolute tragedy. 12-year-old with a new year ahead of him, New Year's Day, 1916, and his whole life ahead of him, and a freak accident happens and, you know, cut off him, not even the prime of his life. But he's here, and today we remember him.
Says the little children to come onto me, to me.
Rest in peace.
So there you go, that's, let's turn that back up. That's just one of the videos that we've made, quite a sad story. And it's not all about death and sad things really, because I'm also quite intrigued by quirky historical discoveries. We were talking to each other on the internet, and I don't know if you've ever noticed there's like an archway at the top of Squire Lane opposite the infirmary where the old girls' grammar school used to be, and we were trying to work out what that stonework might have belonged to, where it might have come from, and we couldn't really find anywhere. But we did actually discover that on a little side street off of Carlisle Road near the mosque there were some gate posts which were actually posts that stood in an old butter market before the original Kergate market way back in the it'll have been the 18th and 19th century. So there is a video about that on the channel, but also we did a little bit of digging and we found out a little bit of history in relation to this church here, which was the Christ Church on the top of Darley Street, and that is long gone, or is it?
Good morning, YouTubers. Today I'm in the middle of city centre of Bradford, and you may recognise where we are, just off Rawson Place. Now shortly I'm going to meet Mark Nicholson, and we're going to chat about a very old building that goes back round about 1815, pre-Victorian, and in our usual manner we shall look at some illustrations, talk a bit about the history of the building, plus we shall see if we can find any stonework left.
We're here to talk about a demolition story in Victorian Bradford, which for once had a happy ending. And we're currently stood on Rawson Square, and this area here was the site of a church called Christ Church, which stood at the top of Darley Street, and that's the church there. Okay. And this little taxi rank, roughly about this very spot here.
Just here,
Yeah. That is where the entrance to the church was. So in 1813, the foundation stone for the church was put into position, and I think it took a couple of years for the church to be constructed, as was the case back in those days. And no sooner had the church been built, the council or corporation, in its wisdom, decided that it wanted to have a direct thoroughfare route from Darley Street to what was the beginning of Manningham Lane, which is now the North Parade area. And obviously that wasn't possible because there was this church in the way. So 66 years after the foundation stone had been put into position, we're now looking at 1879 or thereabouts, it was decided that the church would be demolished in order to accommodate the thoroughfare, and a new Christ Church would be built elsewhere, a little bit further up the road. The front page of the Bradford Observer carries an advert in advance of the demolition where building materials, i.e. stone and what have you, and timber, which had formed the church that stood here, it was put up for sale. There is more than a fragment of the original Christ Church here in Manningham Park, and if you just turn your camera around, there it is.
Wow, let's get a bit closer.
So just a bit of a backstory. In 1882 there was a royal visit in Bradford, the Prince and Princess of Wales at the time, and what they did in Bradford is at various points throughout the city they constructed a number of arches out of wooden canvas, and a replica Norman arch was built here on this corner. And the following year, in 1883, it was decided that it looked so good to have an arch here that they decided to construct a permanent landmark, which is what we still have. So just to add a further little bit of backstory to this, so going back a few years before the royal visit in 1882, we go back to 1879 when the Christ Church at Dallas Street was being demolished, and we saw the advert earlier on, the front page advert, putting building materials up for sale. And there was a news piece in the local Observer, we've got it here, and it said that originally it was advertised to be sold in one lot, but they actually split it down into 12 lots. There was gas piping, stone and woodwork. The grand total for all of the building materials, it was £251, and the stonework itself was sold for £150. And for a number of years, whoever bought it, they kept it in storage somewhere. I don't know for what reason, but fortunately there was the foresight to recycle it. We've got a piece here again from the local Observer, 1883, and it mentions here that they were going to build a permanent Norman arch on this site, and it states within this piece, the work will be carried out in stone, almost the whole of which once formed part of the fabric of Old Christ Church, Darley Street, and it is the gift of Mr. George Poole. What a wonderful gift, and what a wonderful everlasting monument we have. I'll tell you what else I find quite impressive about this little story here. You know, we're talking about Victorian Bradford, and we seem to think that recycling is a 1980s, 1990s sort of thing, but you know, this is recycling at its very, very best. And this corner of Manningham Park, it seems to be almost like a final resting place for things which once existed in the city centre. And who knows, in 10, 20 years' time, after they've pulled down the Kergate Centre, are we going to see a huge piece of concrete over there in that corner? Who knows? Watch this space.
So there you go, that's a little bit of, how can I put it, a little bit of quirky history there. A long established piece of old Bradford, recycled and positioned elsewhere in the city. You know, for many, many years, I went past Manningham Park, going past that arch, and I had no idea of the history behind it. So hopefully, next time you go past, you know, you'll think to yourself, I know where that stonework came from. There's other aspects to the channel as well. One thing that we were asked to start looking at is local stories about true crime. And that's a photograph of a man called Jimmy Adams. who was murdered in Bradford in 1981, and sadly it remains to be an unsolved murder case. We did a video blog about that, which I'll show you in a second, and towards the end of it, afterwards, we were actually contacted by somebody, and it sort of makes what we do worthwhile.
What's up, YouTubers? Today I'm on Heaton Road in Bradford. Now today is a special vlog because our channel is not always about bricks and mortar, it's about people, the people of Bradford. And today is actually a true crime vlog we're doing. It's not often we do this, but this particular crime happened just over 40 years ago, and it shook the Bradford community. So I'm going to meet Mark shortly, and we will follow the murder trail, and hopefully something good will come out of this. Thanks for joining us, Mark. Today we've got a bit of a dark story to tell.
Yes, a very, very dark chapter in Bradford history, I'm afraid. We're currently standing on Heaton Road in the Manningham area, outside number 236. This house was the residence of James Adams, a 46-year-old man who was known more informally as Jimmy, and he worked as a newspaper vendor, and he also worked as a part-time glass collector at the New Beehive pub in Westgate, down near town. And Jimmy was murdered in Bradford in 1981, and it's a crime that remains unsolved to this day. Jimmy was described as being the sort of man that nobody could ever take offence at. You know, he was the sort of guy that did many good turns for people, and he was well liked. So what we're going to do now is we're going to leave Jimmy's former home, and we're going to go to the start of what was a grisly murder trail, basically. The New Beehive pub on Westgate, where Jimmy had worked that evening. So here we are at the New Beehive pub on Westgate, and to set the scene, it was a bank holiday Monday the 25th of May 1981, and Jimmy actually worked here as a glass collector, and he was very, very well thought of by the regulars and also the landlord. And on the night in question, the bank holiday Monday, he actually came here in a new suit. So he was obviously in high spirits, and by all accounts, you know, it was a night he was looking forward to. And like I say, he was well thought of, highly regarded, and in the T&A following the murder, there were a few testimonials from some of the customers and also the landlord. The landlord said that Jimmy was a decent, respectable bloke who did not deserve to die in the way that he did. Another customer, John McCallum, he said, we're all heartbroken about Jimmy. He wouldn't have hurt a fly. A young woman who only gave her name as Heather said he didn't drink and he only ever had 50p in his pocket. Violence of any kind would shock him. Everybody liked him and he always had a joke and a smile. So this was the place where he was on that final night. So around 12:15 on the morning of Tuesday the 26th of May 1981, the pub closed, and it was usual practice for Jimmy to get a lift home or for somebody to walk with him home. But on that night, the customers decided that they were going to go out for a meal, but Jimmy didn't want to go for a meal, so he walked home alone. And that's where we're going to go now. We're going to follow the trail that he would have taken from here. So we're now leaving the New Beehive on Westgate, and we're going to follow the path that Jimmy would have taken on that night. So we're heading towards White Abbey Road. Which does lead on to Wetley Hill. And then at the top was Carlisle Road. Once upon a time there was actually a reservoir
behind this wall here on Carlisle Road. But at the corner here with Bavaria Place, there are some facade elements here of what used to be public toilets. This was an entrance point, and you can actually see no longer in use, long out of use, it's since been blocked up. But this was the scene of the murder. So from a timeline perspective, we're now talking 1 AM on the morning of Tuesday, the 26th of May, 1981. Jimmy Adams was here, he entered the public toilets, and witnesses actually saw this, and they also saw what they described as a blonde-haired man with glasses following him, and he entered the toilets as well. And the witnesses were 3 Asian young men who were believed to have come from the Birmingham area, and they heard a scream. And then the man with the blonde hair and glasses emerged from the toilets and started going off in that direction. And 3 Asian men gave chase, and they actually grabbed him down by the Marlborough Auto Centre, but he broke free and he managed to get away. The police were called, and Jimmy was found inside the toilets, bleeding quite badly. He'd been stabbed in the front, and he'd also been stabbed in the back. And sadly, he died behind this very wall. During the initial police investigation, some evidence was actually recovered. A knife with blood, and also a pair of glasses was found discarded in a work ditch here on Bavaria Place. During their investigation of the crime scene, the police discovered that Jimmy Adams had actually been stabbed 22 times inside the toilet. And they also discovered a blood trail which stretched for more than half a mile from the crime scene in Bavaria Place, and it went all the way up towards the Oak Lane area where the trail petered off. Leading the investigation was Dick Holland, who was also involved with the Ripper case, and he put the call out for members of the public to come forward. And they had quite a small response actually. It looks like only 12 members of the public came forward with information. There was a dawn raid in the area as well, where the blood trail ended, and that came to nothing. But the police were issued with an artist's impression of what the killer looked like. And he actually does resemble the singer John Denver, who had hit singles with Take Me Home Country Roads and Annie's Song. And again, the artist's impression didn't generate any results. And for many, many years, the murder remained unsolved. In 2003, the case was picked up again when new DNA evidence came to light, but again, nothing came of that. So the man who resembled John Denver was either unknown to the police before the murder or after. He was said to have been 20 to 30 years old, and it's quite possible that he's still alive. He would be maybe in his 60s or his 70s, still waiting to be brought to justice.
So we've just arrived at the Nagwood Cemetery, and we've got some detail where Jimmy is actually buried. Just across there I can see Mark going through the plots.
No wonder we couldn't find him. He's here. This tree was obscuring. Managed to push it back as far as I can. Can you see where it says?
Got a torch there?
I have, yeah.
Treasures memories of Jimmy Adams, who died May 26th of 1981, age 46 years.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is.
Those are his adoptive parents, Bob and Audrey.
Right.
So at least they're all together.
Yeah, let's just step back a bit and get an idea. I can't believe where he is.
That took some digging out, did that?
Yeah.
So if I'm covered in bits of fur or pine or whatever, but thank God we found him. Just a bit of a backstory really. He died, as the grave says, and as we've said earlier in the video, on the 26th of May.
the funeral didn't actually happen until quite a few months after. So I've got the death notice here. On Thursday, August the 20th, 1981, so almost 3 months passed before he was given a final resting place.
Right.
And as we've already said earlier in the video, you know, this remains to be, as far as the police go, an unsolved crime. Very, very, very sad story. You know, he sounded like he was a great guy. He didn't deserve what happened to him. Just one of those wrong place, wrong time things, really. There's nothing much we can do for Jimmy in terms of bringing him justice, but what we can do, as we should be doing with everybody that we feature in these videos, is at least remember him.
Yeah.
You know,
And what
he's not forgotten.
what I'll do is I'll drop a phone number to the Crime Stoppers, and if anybody knows anything out there or recall anything after all this time, you don't know, do you?
No.
Just don't know. But sad.
But, as always, rest in peace, Jimmy. Maybe one day.
Now that particular video actually did get quite a good response from a member of Jimmy's family, which I'll share with you now. We received a message from Karen Adams who says, "Thank you for helping me locate my Uncle Jimmy Adams' grave. Been to the cemetery many times on that road looking for it and was unable to find it. And now I know why. I can now go and put flowers down and pay my respects." As we mentioned in the video, it was actually concealed within a tree. I spent about 10 minutes pulling branches off, you know, but now, if anyone ever wanted to go and visit the grave, they can do so. And, you know, I suppose true crime videos are a bit of a Marmite thing, really. Some people like watching them, and some people think you shouldn't even go there and deal with that particular subject. But for us, that feedback we got there from his niece makes that particular story a worthwhile thing to cover. But it isn't all about death, and it isn't all about tragedy with Bradford Through the Lens. Although, I shouldn't have really said that, because the next slide still deals with death and graves. Oh no, it doesn't. Wait a minute. I'll come on to that. There is one last video I want to share with you, and it's about the Students' Club, which used to be in the centre of Bradford, opposite what was the Gaumont Cinema. And I won't say too much about what the venue was, because that will all be explained in the video that I'm about to show you. But this shows another aspect of what we like to do on Bradford Through the Lens.
Welcome back, everyone. Today I'm just approaching the old former Odeon building just across the road. And for the locals out here, you know very well, this building holds a lot of history. And just around the corner there, I'm going to meet Mark, who is going to show us a bit of history that's been exposed by some pipe work just outside the building itself.
Today I'm talking to you live and direct from the centre of Bradford, and behind me is a building that's very, very dear to me, the former Odeon. Now, before the Odeon building had been constructed in 1930, an old brewery had occupied that site, Whittaker's Brewery, or it was more informally known as the Old Brewery. It was demolished in 1928, but across the road from the brewery there was some shops and offices. They were known as the Whittaker buildings, and underneath the road was a series of cellars that connected the two properties. Behind me, Prince's Way stretches across numerous lanes, but back in the day, before Prince's Way was constructed, there was New Victoria Street here, and that was quite a narrow street. So the Whittaker buildings were actually quite close to what was the New Victoria Gaumont Cinema. I'd say roughly where those two black pipes are, that was the corner of the Whittaker buildings.
And if we just glimpse down here in this trench, we can see that they are currently laying down new pipes. But these works have actually offered a tantalising glimpse of what used to be here back in the day. 1957 was actually quite a pivotal year in a lot of ways. Elvis Presley made the film Loving You. Thank you very much to Andrew Bolt's mum for this. And also in 1957, over in Liverpool, the world famous Cavern Club opened. It started off as a jazz club, and then eventually it became a launch pad for the Merseybeat sound. That's where the Beatles and Jerry and the Pacemakers and a whole host of others launched their careers in England. And over here in Bradford in 1957, there was a guy called Mike Lamb who worked up at the St James Market, and he had an idea that Bradford needed a similar venue to the Cavern Club. So in the former brewery cellars or vaults, which lay underneath New Victoria Street, he opened a venue called the Students' Club, which started off as a jazz club, and then as the years went on, it evolved into a little bit of a rock and roll venue, and it closed in 1962, and then the Whittaker buildings on top of it were demolished in 1965. So these excavations have actually revealed something quite interesting. If you look through here, and I don't know if you can make out there's actually a cellar opening. It's mostly covered up by those three support girder things. And you can just make out to the side of it a piece of steel. Now that'll have been the support for the cellars of the Whittaker buildings. So it's approximately under there, some 60 odd years ago, where the youth of Bradford and the jazz fans of Bradford will have all convened under there. The jazz club didn't have an alcohol licence, so there was no drink served down there, but it was quite a groovy place, tables with candles on, and there was actually a rumour that David Hockney used to frequent the Students' Club, and he had actually painted a wall mural, but that's long since been dismissed and discounted. This area is going to be filled in again quite shortly, but this will be our only glimpse of this particular slice of Old Bradford history. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That was the most recent video that we published that one last week. And the 4 videos I've shown you there is, I don't know, it's just like a taster really of what the channel's all about. You can go onto it and you can dip in and choose what it is you want to see. So if you're interested in quirky history, you can see videos about the old butter market or the recycled church stone in the arch at Manningham Park. If you're interested in true crime, we've got a few videos on there along those lines. Other interesting videos which have access to areas which the public can't generally get to. We recently went in and filmed the vault that holds Sir Titus Salt in the church at Saltaire. But just going back to what I was saying before that video came on, and it brings things around full circle for me really, because like I say, I started watching the channel and it was the videos that Riaz Ahmed made about the Ripper victims, and on the left hand side you can see what used to be the grave marker for one of the Ripper victims, Helen Ritker, who was murdered in 1978, and as a result of the video being on the channel on Christmas Day last year, one of the viewers, and I don't know if he's related to Helen Ritker or I don't know what his association is with her, but he got in touch with us to say that he had made her a more acceptable looking marker, I suppose, and he did all that on Christmas Day. And you know, that was quite a nice gesture, because by all accounts that grave it looked quite neglected really. You know, it didn't appear to have anybody visiting it. So that's as a result of the channel. And that's actually a message that we got through this morning, came through one day ago. A lad called Stephen T. Bowling. Thanks to Bradford Through The Lens, I was able to find out more info on my family ancestry and places to visit while I'm there. Thank you. And that kind of brings things back to Riaz's original vision for the channel, really. He wanted to reach out to people and for people to reach out back, and for younger people to be interested in local history and their own history. So that's what we want to encourage people to do, to view the channel, to get involved, to see what's on there. We're always open to hear of stories which might be exclusive to you and your family that nobody knows about. There could well be a hero. It could have been somebody that worked for the fire brigade. It could be somebody who works in the medical profession. They might have been involved in the building of an iconic building in Bradford. There's so much hidden aspects to Bradford that have just been lost through time, and we'll never uncover all of them. But we'll have a good go at trying to do so. We've got quite a few videos which are in the can, which were filmed, covering all manner of things. A couple of them are, shall we say, transport related with a slight disastrous conclusion. But like I say, do check out the channel, and we're always open to ideas, especially spooky stories. I want to do more ghost stories. But for our presentation, it is the first one. It's been a bit tricky, really, trying to negotiate everything in the dark, so there has been a few stuttering moments, for which I do apologise. But in the words of Riaz, thank you very much for watching, and peace out. Thank you. Now then, I don't know if anybody's got any questions or anything for us, or any comments, any feedback on what we're doing. No? Right. You can turn it off, Raz. Thank you very much for watching. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I'm sure everybody's found it very interesting. I know I have.